The difference between high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome is in how they are spelled. And that may be partly why the developers of the DSM-5 descriptors or definition, the next version of the DSM, there is going to be no more Asperger's syndrome. There is going to be no more PDD-NOS, which stands for physician didn't decide. But everybody will be lumped into what is known now as the autism spectrum. And there's good and bad to that, which we'll get into later. Repetitive motions, self-stimulatory activity, interests that get so tightly wound up that there are no, they may interfere with all aspects of life. Arnold Miller, researcher in Boston, indicates that people with autism just don't get needed information from the environment for typical interaction or development. I think there's a lot to be said for that too. For example, how much information do we receive from nonverbal cues, from body language, as part of the total interaction package? And studies show that it's up at around 60 to 80%, which means people with autism are just relying on words, as opposed to the meaning, which is between the words, or between the lines, pragmatics. So as I talk about these characteristics of autism, there is a common thread that binds together every single description that I've described. It's a common thread on how most people consider what autism is. It's how autism is diagnosed. It's how interventions are developed. What is that common thread? Any ideas? Who wants to volunteer an idea? Who's brave enough? I think you have an idea. Yeah. Social interaction. Yeah, autism is a social condition. And the reason why it's so hard to come up with is because it's more of a cultural type of definition or situation. It's how we culturally think of autism. Everything that I've mentioned so far is a deficit. I've talked about what people with autism cannot do. The diagnostic procedure is a deficit model. So the parent who is first told their child's been diagnosed, the next thing they hear is, these are all the things your child won't be able to do, will have difficulties doing. But what about what people with autism can do? And to that end, I think of a verbal man with autism who provides transportation system information to lost patrons in Paddington Station in England. Really busy station. He uses his verbal communication style. Verbal communication style of people with Asperger's syndrome. How many of you know people with Asperger's syndrome? So how many of you would agree that the interaction style is direct, factual, truthful, to the point, detailed, repetitive? Is this how you want to receive information when you're lost? Or do you want to wade through idioms and jokes? So it works. Where does he get his information? His coworkers have to look it up in a reference. He's got it all memorized. So strictly because he has autism, he outperforms his coworkers who don't have autism. And that's what I mean by looking at characteristics and finding a way, without putting a judgment value on them, to use those characteristics to help a person with autism lead a fulfilling and productive life. Now, as we consider the definition of autism, do these three areas fully define the condition? Or is there more? In some of my research, I asked people who had been working in the field of autism, people who had been key developers in some of the more promising approaches we know today, such as applied behavioral analysis, TEACH, Miller method, floor time, daily life therapy. And I asked them what they thought of the descriptors as we see here. And they all agreed that they were lacking.